The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This Prime Minister has lost control, but he's clinging to power with the help of his NDP Liberal leader coalition partner, who said, I'm going to quote the NDP leader here, he said, the Liberals are too weak, too selfish, and too beholden to corporate interests to fight for people. He bemoaned the fact that the Teamsters and the ILWU were forced back to work, violating their right to strike. How can this Prime Minister cling to power with the help of someone who says he's too weak and too greedy to govern?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the Conservative leader has spent the last few months in this House trying to demonstrate that Parliament can't work for Canadians. He's been obstructing debate. He's been obstructing our ability to move forward on delivering for Canadians. And indeed, every chance he gets, he votes against measures that would support Canadians, whether it's the tax break that we're giving over the next few months, whether it's moving forward on dental, on a school food program, on more spots in lower price childcare. These are things he's voting against because he just wants Canadians to believe that everything is broken. Well, it's not, Mr. Speaker. We're continuing to believe in Canadians and build a stronger future together.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Speaker, Canadians want to fire that costly Prime Minister. His MPs want to fire that costly Prime Minister. The only one keeping him in power is the NDP leader, who again says the Liberals are too weak, too selfish, and too beholden to corporate interests to fight for people. Oh, and now they're complaining that Canadians might choose me if there were an election. That's not their choice. It's not my choice. It's not any of their choices. That's the decision of the Canadian people. So why doesn't he turn the decision over to the people who run this country, Canadians, in a carbon tax election?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Once again, the Conservative...
Again, ask honourable members not to take the floor. The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, once again, the Conservative leader demonstrates that he's trying very, very hard to prevent anything from being delivered for Canadians, whether it was dental care, whether it's the tax break that Canadians are getting off the sales tax for the next few months, whether it's initiatives around childcare or a school food program. He has stood up time and time in this House again and again to vote against measures that directly support Canadians, that grow the economy, that help people out, because his political argument relies on people being broken, Canadians being divided, people being angry. That's not the way we're going to...
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
We'll fix everything he broke, Mr. Speaker, as my great finance critic said. And, you know, let's start with the carbon tax. The Indian Resource Council announced today they will be presenting a resolution at the Assembly of First Nations Special Chiefs Assembly to take the Liberal NDP Prime Minister's carbon tax to court. They say, we will not stand by where our communities are pushed further into poverty by the tax we never agreed to. And they want to dispel any notion that lower-income First Nations are better off with the carbon tax rebate. Mr. Speaker, why won't he listen to courageous First Nations people and have a carbon tax election?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, Indigenous people have been the first and have for the longest stood up to highlight the dangers of climate change, the impact of neglecting our environment, of not protecting our lands and our oceans, particularly against the previous Conservative government of which that member was a part. The reality is, Mr. Speaker, the Canada carbon rebate puts more money back in the pockets of 8 out of 10 Canadians right across the country. We will continue to fight climate change by putting more money in their pockets, despite the attempts of the Leader of the Opposition.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Is talking down to First Nations people again. They said that they've done the research, and I quote, They want to dispel any notion that lower-income First Nations are better off with the carbon tax rebate. In rural and remote communities where First Nations live, the tax drives up their food, their heat, and their transportation bill so much that the Ontario Liberal leader, Bonnie Crombie, has said, I promise you, I will tell the Prime Minister he was wrong on issues like the carbon tax. Why won't he listen to Bonnie Crombie and other Liberals and call it carbon tax?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, Indigenous peoples across this country know better than most the costs of inaction on climate change, the impacts of extreme weather events, the impacts, quite frankly, of Conservative underinvestment for years in the kind of infrastructure and supports they needed. We turned that around, Mr. Speaker. We started treating Indigenous peoples and communities as partners. We invested in fighting climate change. We're putting more money back in the pockets of 8 out of 10 Canadians with the Canada Carbon Rebate. We are continuing to make sure that protecting the environment and growing the economy for everyone goes hand in hand. That's the path forward.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
The Halifax longshoremen, unionized workers, have just put out a statement. On Monday, the NDP has the opportunity to reinforce that they will not bring in back-to-work legislation by supporting their own leaders' words. And below are those words in a copy of the common sense Conservative motion calling the Liberals, quoting the NDP Liberal leader as saying, the Liberals are too weak, too selfish, and too beholden to corporate interests to fight for people. Will the NDP Liberals stand with unions and vote non-confidence in this costly government?
Hey, bravo! The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
We can tell, Mr. Speaker, why the Conservative leader is so desperate to bring Parliament to a halt, to prevent debate on matters that are actually going to deliver for Canadians. As we support Canadians, as we make investments that are growing the economy and showing up for Canadians, like the tax break over the next few months, the Conservative leader sees that we're actually solving some of the challenges that the global economy has tossed our way. These are things that we are focused on while he's focused on his own political partisan advantage and personal attacks. We're going to stay focused on Canadians, on delivering for them tangibly and concretely.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
His own party doesn't agree with him. He's so weak that the NDP keeps him in power while the Liberal Premier of Newfoundland and Labrador is attacking his energy cap. The Liberal Premier says that this reduction of 35% in Newfoundland's energy production is already sending investment away. We understand that President Trump wants to take our money in jobs. But why is the Prime Minister standing against his own Liberal Premier in Newfoundland and Labrador to help Trump do it?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, across the country, except on the Conservative benches, Canadians know climate change is real. Canadians are also stepping up in lots of different ways to help reduce their emissions, to grow the economy, to create a better future for their kids and grandkids. The multi-billion-dollar profitable industry that is the oil and gas industry right now has an unlimited ability to emit emissions into the atmosphere. We don't think any industry, particularly not one as wildly profitable as the oil and gas industry, should be able to have unlimited pollution. That's why we're putting a cap on emissions, not on production, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
That's factually false. The industry's emissions have been regulated for decades, Mr. Speaker, and he just wants to shut down their production and give more of the money and jobs to Donald Trump and the United States of America. And then there's the electricity tax. He calls it a regulation, but now we know that it's a tax because the independent Ontario energy operator says that this new regulation tax will drive up costs for families by $175 a year and will drive factories, mines, and mills south of the border. Why is it killing jobs with high electricity prices?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, our oil and gas emissions cap is a cap on emissions, not on production, Mr. Speaker. No sector should be allowed unlimited pollution, and it's unfortunate the Conservatives continue to defend that incredibly profitable sector that is costing Canadians so much. The reality is we will continue to work with the industry that is working on reducing its emissions, because we know that's how we protect oil and gas sector jobs into the future, by innovating, by bringing on better technologies, and by recognizing that no sector should have a right to pollute unlimitedly.